Sound okay? Okay. Okay, we're ready to go. Namo Da Fang Guang Fo Huayan Jing Huayan Highway Fo Pusa. Namo Da Fang Guang Fo Huayan Jing Huayan Highway Fo Pusa. Namo Da Fang Guang Fo Huayan Jing Huayan Highway Fo Pusa. Homage to the Avatamsaka Assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Tonight, I am standing in for Dharma Master Heng, who is in China and unable to do the Saturday night Avatamsaka lecture. Tonight we're continuing. I'm hoping to pick up pretty much where Dharma Master Heng left off last week. Maybe some overlap, I'm not sure, but it's okay. If you overlap with the Avatamsaka, it's actually a blessing. The more you read it, the more you recite it, the more benefit. I'm going to start with a section, and then the page numbers I have here basically I think are 63 and 60, yeah, it goes into 64 and 65. But we're starting in the Chinese just a little bit above the end of 63. So we'll try to, nobody has a text, so you're going to have to bear with my, right now, what?
Lock, is it possible to project?
No, that's okay.
No? Okay, he's not showing the text.
Right. So I'll struggle through the Chinese on this, and up to you. Well, this is entering the Dharma Realm chapter. It's not the same one as we were doing last night. So the people online, bear with us while we're dropping a screen to project the text onto it. So I'm beginning in the English is they traveled to all villages and hamlets, and I'm going to try to stumble through the Chinese a little bit here. Wang yi, yi qie, cun ying, cheng yi. Wang du, zhu lo, zhu zhong shang suo, sui qi suo ying, yi zhong zhong xing shang, zhong zhong wei yi, zhong zhong yin shang, zhong zhong yan lun, zhong zhong chu, zhu chu, yu yi che shi jian, you ru di wang, xing pu sa heng. So the text in English, they traveled to all villages, hamlets, cities, provinces, capital cities, and gathering places, and accord with the propensities of all living beings, with various shapes and forms, various comportments, various sounds, various discourses and theories, and various dwelling places. And throughout worlds like Indris Net, they cultivated bodhisattvas practices. So here we're picking up on the activities, the conducts, the vows, and then the commitments that come out of those vows to teach and transform. The scope of the text is things that we recognize: villages, hamlets, cities, provinces, you could say in the United States, states, counties, capital cities, minor cities, all kinds of gathering places. But this is also meant to describe a larger world that maybe is not made up of such things. The Avatamsaka presents many worlds, many different places. Some have familiarity to us, but others are organized around completely different settings. Some of them are just all-way places. Some of these worlds are falling apart and don't have, say, their trip together, as we say in English. Some are coming into being, some are thriving, some are going bad, some are on the point of extinction. The bodhisattvas go to all these different places. Their goal being to just do what they can in any situation. For people who are really good, they just support that goodness and encourage them to move it up a level. So if they're good, they move it to sagely. If they're sagely, they move it to bodhisattvas. People are bad, they try to encourage to hold the 5 precepts, to become good moral people. They don't necessarily, in these places, talk to them about becoming Buddhas or bodhisattvas, because their propensities to understand and respond to that are not yet ripe. So all of this is what we call in psychology shaping, or in Chinese it's fangbian, upaya. And this is really critical in Dharma, because Dharma is not fixed. In Chinese, it's iche fa, all Dharma, wu ding, not fixed. Wu you ding fa is another way of, I think, of saying it. And what this means is that Dharma is not completely relative, but its usefulness resides in its ability to be completely in sync and right on the spot to where a particular individual or living being is. The text compares this to skillful, timely medicine that is matched exactly to the symptoms and the causes of an illness. The ability to do this, of course, requires an incredible selflessness and sensitivity, which is what these bodhisattvas cultivate. And they're only able to cultivate that selfless sensitivity, in a sense, because they don't have their egos out in front. They're actually really reading the audience, so to speak. But they're not reading the audience to make a splash. They're not reading the audience to show themselves, but they're reading the audience much the way a doctor does diagnostics on a patient to figure out what is ailing that person, and then to impartially but compassionately come up with an antidote or counter. So this is key. In the Lankavatara Sutra, there's an actual discussion of this, and it's very interesting. When the Tathagata is asked what is Dharma, sometimes translated as a teaching or the teaching, in the Lankavatara Sutra it says, if the teaching does not accord with the this and that, in other words, with the situation and the person, it's actually not a teaching, it's not Dharma. So we have to stop thinking of Dharma as some sort of crafted, written in stone text or series of beliefs or even statements of principle, and more as a grab bag, so to speak. I mean this in a reverent sense, a grab bag of medicines and tools that exist and are effective only to the degree that they respond to the propensity of a living being in any particular situation. So Dharma in one situation could be weak or even useless in another situation, and Dharma in another situation that's totally appropriate could just bounce off the ears, so to speak, of another person. This skill of being able to match Dharma with propensities or potentials here is one of the accomplishments of these bodhisattvas, and that's what makes them such great teachers. And they go to these worlds and they say with various shapes and forms. This is probably describing not only the human world, which has various shapes and forms, as you all realize, and we're always trying to change our shape and form into something that we think is more pleasing or whatnot, whether it's weight reduction or muscle addition. And anyway, this is not just talking about people. This is talking about the shapes and forms of people in the 10 Dharma realms. So you have the realm of animals, ghosts, hungry ghosts, so to speak, asuras, people, animals. And in all these different realms, there's variations in the 6 paths of sizes and shapes, configurations. We mostly recognize those in the human realm. The animal realm we're more or less familiar with, but the hells, the ghosts, the asuras, these we less know about directly. That isn't to say they're not unknowable, but generally in an uncultivated way of living, these things are not available to us. We call them the unseen, but they're only unseen because we're not seen. It's not means they're visible. They're just not seen by the way we configure our consciousness and our sense organs to take in these things. And then they have various comportments, various sounds, and here it's very interesting. Various sounds could be obviously the different languages, the way they communicate. Animals communicate with each other and sometimes across species. People communicate through language, but all the different linguistic structures, maybe we know one or two. I mean, I'm just sort of like, how many languages do you know? I'm looking around. 3, which Chinese? 3.5. Okay. Does that mean you only speak half the time or you only know half the language? Chinese, English, and what? And Vietnamese. Anybody? 2? What are they?
English and Vietnamese.
Oh, I thought you were going to say English and code, which is coding. That's also a language. Okay. Anybody? Chinese, English, Huh?
What about math?
Math?
Is math a language?
Math could be considered a language. It's very esoteric. Well, then you're getting into, this gets into the discourses and theories, because how people communicate, very interesting. It's not just in spoken words. Sometimes it's in abstractions. Sometimes it's in visuals. The whole aesthetic presentation of art and music is a form of language, so to speak, because it communicates and has a response, an echo and a response, and so forth. And sometimes these are much more powerful than our spoken words to convey. Movies, for example, are a form of communication. Often in watching a silent movie, you can pick up a lot of content and information that isn't necessarily dependent on words and language. So this is, there was a song called The Sounds of Silence from the 60s, which was a very popular song. But it does resonate in the sense that sometimes silence itself is a kind of language that communicates. And then there, of course, is signing and sign language, which replaces the audio part. So this is very, very rich about, but they're skilled at all of this. This is the point. Now, how skilled are they? Obviously, they learn faster than we do. I'm speaking generally. And the reason they learn faster is they left less impediments, less obstructions to their learning process. The amount of focus and concentration they can bring to any subject matter is absolutely stunning. We sit down to study, we study for a while, and then we're distracted. We do a little text on the phone, go back to studying again, we fuzzy out, come back over it again, back over. Even if we try to memorize something, it's really quite a joke. But they don't have this problem of distraction. You could say it's a part of their samadhi skill or their dingli, their concentration powers. But the result is when they set their minds to do a task, they go through it and take it in and absorb it much more quickly than we could. It's not that they have more power than we, it's simply that they have less distractions that pull them away from that. So memorization is actually a good technique to develop a kind of samadhi power. Because if you set yourself to memorize something and stay with it, it holds you to the flame, so to speak. It holds you there. And that holding it there develops a muscle that isn't normally developed, because most of the time we spend with our mind and our consciousness is scatterblitz. It's all over the place. And to some extent, modern society encourages that, feeds off of that. If you look, sometimes I'll watch a movie from my grandparents' era, very early movie, very slow. And there's people talking. And then there's a pause and there's another talk. You watch movies today, it's just about every 2 or 3 seconds it changes. I mean, psychologically, this is very interesting. Even you watch an ad now, before the ads used to be, please be interested in this product. Many people say this product, no, you don't see that anymore. It's bing, 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 bing. And so this is basically showing that what we call progress is actually a prapancha in Sanskrit, which is a proliferation or breaking up of our consciousness into smaller and smaller bits of ability to concentrate. We think we're concentrating, but we're not. We're actually scattering. It's sort of like our consciousness is pixelated. Do the pixelated thing when you're watching something on a screen and all of a sudden it just starts to break up? This is scattered consciousness. Actually, divided consciousness is the actual translation for the sixth consciousness called Vijnana. So V means divided, jhana, consciousness, divided consciousness. This is the discursive consciousness, and it's really getting more and more discursive. So, I mean, I know this to be a fact. A goldfish can concentrate longer than a human being. I'm not making this up. This is a recent study when they tested goldfish for their ability to stay on something. I think it was like 3 to 5 seconds or 4 to 5 seconds. And the human being came in at 2 to 3 seconds. So now somebody's thinking, gosh, I want to be a goldfish. No, you don't. You don't want to be a goldfish. You want to be a better person. But in any event, this is sort of like what this is talking about. So yes, something like math could be included in the languages. There are various dwelling places, but there are various discourses and theories, and this has to do with the ways in which people make sense of their world. This is talking about ways of knowing. And it's not the same, even in this world. What people consider to be important, valuable, right or wrong, their ethics, what they consider to be fact or fiction, or myth or reality, it's all over the map, all over the map. And that we can communicate it all is something of a miracle, really, to get past the paradigms and the idioms that we use and that we think are proper. This is why communication and negotiations across cultures is very, very difficult to on a very simple matter. I remember when I was doing a little bit of training like this, if you're going to be in a negotiating situation or an international situation and you're meeting people, depending on who you're meeting, then determines how close you are. This is something very simple. It's like in some cultures, if I'm at this distance, that's perfect. In other cultures, this is really intrusive in your face. It's like back off. And in other cultures, it's not close enough. It shows coldness. So even physical distance is across time and culture very different. Very different. Touching, shaking hands, hugging. You know, in America, hey, I love you, buddy. You know, give a big hug. Some cultures, that's considered almost to be assault. Really. And so these values, these constructs, these ways of thinking and feeling are very different across cultures. Even when you get on an elevator, you feel this. How close do you stand to anybody on an elevator? What's the right distance? What's too close? What's further away? Do you strike up a conversation? Or do you not strike up a conversation? And when you get on an elevator with people from 5 or 6 different countries, it's very, very different. So marriage, divorce, children, raising children, all of this is very different. The discourses and theories are talking about basically the whole rich canvas of philosophy, religion, theology, science, and all the ways we, quote, make sense of reality. So throughout worlds like Indris Net, you're all familiar with that metaphor, right? Indris Net. The interstices of a net that has many jewels or pearls within each of the interstices, like a fishing net, so to speak, and they mutually reflect each other ad infinitum. This is also a metaphor for the Avatamsaka Sutra. My teacher gave it as a metaphor for how we should be as people. We should all be little jewels, mutually reflecting on each other, so that you don't feel as if, oh, your light's brighter than mine, I'm going to put your light out, or I'm going to try to shine brighter than you and have a conflict. But he used it as an example of don't be jealous and obstructive. Let the light just grow and shine and not try to cut off others or outshine them or so forth. Anyhow, Indris Net, they cultivated bodhisattva practices. This passage here, especially the passage of the various shapes and forms, various sounds, discourses, and theories, learning and knowing all this is really my understanding of Master Hua's vision of education. Even when we were monks, I traveled more when I was a monk than I ever did before I was as a layperson, to different countries, different places. And I spent more time out, going about, traveling. He said, go out and see and be seen. Go out and see and be seen. So when we were even in monastic robes, you know, where's Heng tonight? He's in China with 2 other monks. They're traveling. They're seen and they're being seen. Ironically, it's like officials from China are coming over to the Bay Area, and monks from the Bay Area are going over to China. So that's kind of happening now. Different purposes, but going out and seeing and being seen, reaching out, inviting, gathering in, all of this activity is part of what he saw as at the heart of education, which was to embrace and expand and bring in all the different beings, all the different theories, as varied and different as they were. So their propensities here would be their thought ways, their emotions, their languages, their beliefs, their myths, science, arts, technology, politics, views on death, on family, on war, on peace, psychological contours of their minds and their, it's, when I was in university, in graduate school, my minor area of study was cultural anthropology. And I took a fascinating course at that time called Anthropological Perspectives on Mental Disorders. It was very interesting. And one of the takeaways from the course was the actual symptoms of certain mental disorders, schizophrenia, psychosis, what other ones that we know? Don't tell me the ones you got, just tell me the ones you know about. Bipolar, neurosis, right? I'm just giving the standard list. This isn't a check-in, okay? The symptoms of those were almost across cultures uniform. They manifested and presented almost identical. The interpretation of those, however, varied widely. And so in one culture, a psychotic break was grounds for forced hospitalization and locking someone up. In another culture, it was an indication that you were a shaman with divine connections, and you were there then to interpret the ways of the gods to people. You had an elevated status for the same symptoms that was put you in a hospital in another culture. I'm just giving you one example. There are many examples like this. And so what's interesting about this is when I say psychological contours, even these things vary widely across cultures and places. Architecture, just another example of form and function and how we identify with architecture, what we think is a sacred space, for example. Some people consider sacred spaces these large sort of Baroque cathedrals. Other people say a real sacred space is a grove of redwoods, and it's no building at all. And they actually then have a religion that anchors itself in the architecture of the open skies and nature and not in buildings and places. Icons and images, wow, quite a difference. Right within the Buddhist tradition, for example, what does a Buddha look like? I can ask this question. Huh? I don't see, the Buddha here looks more Chinese than Indian. Hmm? When you ask people what Buddhas look like, they usually have the top knot, the long ears, right? And they look more, well, here they look pretty Chinese. You go to Thailand, they look a little different. You go to Burma, they're still different. Japanese Buddhists don't look like Burmese Buddhas. Burmese Buddhas don't look like Berkeley Buddhas. And it's just like, well, wait a minute. So what we even think of as a sacred image, the actual picture or the sculpture of a Buddha, is not the same across cultures at all. And some might find it actually not only offensive, but irreverent and even, how should I say, sacrilegious to present the Buddha in a certain way. That's not the cultural icon that one grew up with or one is associated with. When I was in India, we went to, I think it was Benares, Sarnath. We were in Sarnath, and they had a museum in Sarnath with Buddha images. And it was really interesting. There was, as you went down, they were all different. There was Chinese, Burmese, Thai, whatnot. And then I came to this one, I go, whoa, that's cool. And it looked like Abe Lincoln sitting in full lotus. And then I looked and I saw Buddha image presented from the United States of America. And I was like, oh my gosh. So the image there was not the long lobes. This looked like Abe Lincoln Arhat, if you can imagine what that looked like. So quite interesting. But what I'm getting at here is that all of these are made from the mind, and they reflect the mind. And so in Master Hua's vision of the university, it was basically to bring together an understanding and a study and appreciation of the mind and all its states as it created all these fields of learning and knowledge. And that what you were studying when you studied all these forms and various philosophies and discourses and whatnot, you were actually looking at the mind as it manifests, creating the 10,000 things. So this is why it was called Dharma Realm Buddhist University. The Dharma Realm meaning including all of humanity, all beings in their various expressions, getting to understand very much like this passage tonight. And then the idea that it was open to all of the various backgrounds to come in. It wasn't just for Buddhists. It was for anybody who wanted to get access to this kind of way of seeing and thinking. The text goes on. Perhaps they spoke of the arts and crafts of all worlds, or they spoke of the lamp of omniscience that illumines the world, or they spoke of the adornments of all beings' karmic power, or they spoke of the establishment of the different vehicles within countries of the 10 directions. This is a kind of interesting passage too, because how do you understand the different vehicles within countries of the 10 directions? Please don't somebody go to Chevrolet, Ford, and Tesla. What does that mean? Are we having a problem with the screen? There's nothing on it yet? Now it's working? Okay. If you do this strictly in the Buddhist sense, you think of the three vehicles. Remember from the Lotus Sutra? Anybody? What the vehicles were? What are they? So you had three vehicles, right? The what they call the sound hearers, and then the Pratyeka Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, and then the Buddha vehicle. So essentially there's four. But actually, I'm looking at this passage a little wider than that. It's not just the 2 or 3 or 4, but it could be basically all religions are a kind of vehicle. All forms of study and learning are vehicles that are inquiring to advance our understanding of humanity and to reunite with our spiritual nature. So that's the case. Then this includes basically anything that brings you to a better level of your humanity. I wouldn't consider it a vehicle if you degrade, because that's actually going backwards. It's not a vehicle that's moving forward. Anything that moves forward. So in this sense, vehicles are just expedients. They're not destinations. I want to say this again. The vehicles as presented here are expedient devices, but they're not destination. The Lotus Sutra brings us back to the one vehicle and says, okay, all the other vehicles were expedients. The one vehicle, the Buddha vehicle, is the true vehicle. But even there's a hint in the Lotus Sutra that the Buddha vehicle itself is also an expedient. The Avatamsaka takes it, I think, a little further and says there's not even a single vehicle. Now, you think, oh boy, I'm really pushing. Do you remember the verse from the Platform Sutra between Shensho and Huineng? Shensho wrote his verse, Bodhi's like a tree, the mind a mirror stand bright, constantly brush it clean, let no dust alight. And then Huineng wrote his verse. Anybody know what that is? Remember? If you're going to say it, you need the mic. Okay. Everybody's in samadhi for lotus. To get up and get a mic is to break their concentration. Here we go. Basically, the Bodhi has no tree, nor any mirror stand bright. Essentially, there's not one thing where could dust alight. This where could dust alight, essentially, there's not one thing, is basically saying that there is fundamentally no vehicle. We're already whole and complete, all have the Buddha nature. If we just realize that, it's all finished. The vehicles only come about because we don't have that direct understanding. And that's also batched with the parable of the raft. which is in both the Mahayana and Theravada or Pali text. And you know that parable, correct? That the Buddha asks if you're on one shore and it's very dangerous and the other shore is safe and secure, but you have no way to cross over this river in between, what should you do? And the disciples answered, do whatever you can. Throw together some bamboo and sticks and twine, get on it and pump your hands and legs and get to the other side. And the Buddha said, that's correct. And when you get to the other side, what should you do with that raft that you used to get over there? Should you carry it on land and walk around with it? And the disciples said, no, that would be foolish. Just leave it and go on because it's served its purpose. And then he says, the Buddha says, in the same way, my teaching is just like a raft to get from one shore to the other. Once you're to the other shore, let it go. Then the closing part of that is you have to let go of Dharma, capital D, meaning the teaching, the vehicle. And then he says in the closing line, how much the more so a Dharma, that which is not even crossing over, that which is just worldly confusion. So then Huineng in his text brings this up. He talks about, he says, there's only one vehicle, Buddhahood, no other vehicle. Whether there might be two or three, and all the other countless provisional expedients with various stories, parables, and sayings, all these teachings are meant to lead to the one Buddha vehicle. How can you not understand? The three carts are provisional and early and preliminary teaching. The one vehicle is real, meant for here and now. He is only teaching you to leave the provisional and return to the real. Once you return to the true and real, it too has no name. This is the key line. It has no name. It's not a vehicle anymore. So the Buddha vehicle is also an expedient. And the Avatamsaka is very clear about this. There's this one line in the Avatamsaka that says, the ultimate attainment, and it says, all Buddhas are not. I mean, it's really an interesting line. It's basically saying there isn't even that mark at the ultimate attainment. So then Huineng goes on, and he's got this very interesting continuation. You should understand, he's telling his disciples, that all the treasure and wealth comes from you. All the treasure and wealth. This is in relation to, he's talking about the lotus. The kids thought that the treasures and wealth were in the carts. But Huineng is now doing a mind ground reverse teaching on this and saying, basically, the carts are just expedients. The real wealth comes from you. The cart's use depends on you. Don't keep thinking anymore of a father and children of the carts, or even of use. Not ruminating over this is called holding in mind the Lotus Sutra. Not ruminating over this as some external teaching or position is actually reciting the Lotus Sutra. Really interesting. Then throughout all time, your hands will never drop the sutra. From morning to night is always in your mind. So basically he's saying if you are using it correctly, you're moving beyond the vehicle itself, and you're coming back to your own true mind. And then let me finish this chapter. This comes from the Lively Encounters chapter where he's teaching one of his disciples who has been reciting the Lotus Sutra thousands upon thousands of times, obviously committed to memory, and is asking questions about it. And the master says, you've misunderstood the sutra's meaning. You've attached to the words and missed the heart of it. And the heart of it is to come back to your own true nature. You're clinging to the sutra words and not understanding the wealth within you. And then he says to this disciple, only pay attention to your original mind. Don't get entangled in the external form of Dharma. The Dharma doesn't have 4 different vehicles. See, I didn't make this up. I'm trying to explain that I'm not going over some radical edge here. The Dharma does not have 4 different vehicles. It's people's minds that differ. Learning through reading, listening, and reciting is a small vehicle, Awakening to dharmas and understanding their meaning is a middle vehicle. Cultivating according to the teachings is a great vehicle. To completely fathom the 10,000 things, all the while remaining undefiled by anything, detached from all appearances, grasping at nothing at all, This is the highest vehicle. Do you see how this thing works out? If indeed, undefiled, detached from all appearances, grasping at nothing, then there is no vehicle even. He says that the highest vehicle is no vehicle. I know this sounds kind of strange, but that's where he's going. Vehicles, and this is a line that I really appreciated, because much of my education, including religious education, was about debate and discussion. Taking a position and arguing left and right about it. And what Hui Neng is saying here, he says, vehicles are methods of practice, not subjects for debate. Vehicles, all the different schools or the very isms of, especially within, say, the Buddhist tradition alone. Let's just say within the Buddhist tradition, whether we have Theravada, Mahayana, Vajrayana. You also have secret school, Chan school, Pure Land school, study school, precept schools. You have these different schools. You have Pure Land school, you have YN school, and so forth. But he's saying here, these are just methods of practice. They're not subjects of debate. What you get into, this one's better than that one, is already losing that mind, which he says is undefiled. Now it's defiled. Then he says, cultivate yourself, don't ask me. At all times, your own essential nature is itself, truly as it is. So this is a wonderful passage from the Platform Sutra where Hui Neng gets into the idea of the different vehicles and both their usefulness and ultimately their uselessness. But the key has to be you don't drop it before you got to the other shore. So if you're on the other shore and say all vehicles are expedients and you just sit there and drown, you miss the point. You have to take it up, and you have to take it up like your life depends on it, and you have to take that vehicle, enter that gourd, whether it's recitation, bowing, chan, enter it deeply. When one connects, they all connect. Then you'll naturally let go of it because you're liberated. You don't need it anymore. But to preternaturally, or before it's time to let go, you'll sink, you'll drown. Sometimes you figure this out yourself. Sometimes you need a teacher to do this when it's time to move beyond something. But most people stop before they arrive. They stop before they reach destination, either because they're bored or they're in a hurry, they want special states and results very quickly, and then they stop that practice. They may stop practice altogether, or they switch to another practice. So it's like, they say rubbing sticks to make a fire, right? And you're rubbing sticks to make a fire, and it's really hard, and the more you work, and suddenly it starts to get warm, there's still no fire, you go, I'm gonna quit. Oh, those sticks are better. So you go and pick up 2 other sticks, and you do the same thing. They're all just sticks. But, unless you actually push it through to actually get a fire going, you think the magic is with the sticks and not with the effort. So Dharma doors are only, or Dharma practices are only effective because of what you bring to them, the energy you put into them. They have no magic in and of themselves. It's just like food has no nourishment unless you eat it. And Dharma doors are only effective and efficacious in the actual doing of them. Collecting them, cherishing them, wearing them around your neck, whatever, doesn't bring the result. Okay. Text goes on. Then the youth Manjushri came forth from the wholesome abode pavilion, accompanied by limitless bodhisattvas. With him were also spirits of adamantine goodness, who were constantly in attendance, the many-bodied spirits who made offerings to the Buddha for the sake of beings everywhere, the spirits who traveled on foot, having made solid vows to always follow and assist, the earth-ruling spirits who delighted in hearing the Dharma, the water-ruling spirits who always cultivated great compassion, the fire-ruling spirits who illumined with wisdom's life, the wind-ruling spirits who were crowned with mani, and the behavior of beings, and the direction-ruling spirits who were clear in mind and skilled at the behavior of beings in the 10 directions. There were also night-ruling spirits who were especially diligent in destroying ignorance and darkness, day-ruling spirits who single-mindedly revealed the Buddha's sun without the slightest laxness, space-ruling spirits who adorned the Dharma realm and all of space, ocean-ruling spirits who save beings from the ocean of existences, mountain-ruling spirits who diligently amass good roots that aid the path and that approach omniscience. They were lofty and massive like mountains. Fortress-ruling spirits who always diligently guarded and protected beings, fortress of the Bodhi mind. Dragon kings who constantly and diligently protected the unsurpassed city of Dharma and the wisdom of omniscience. Yaksha kings who constantly guarded beings. Gandharva kings who always increased the happiness of beings. Kumanda kings who also always diligently destroyed the destinies of the hungry ghost. Garuda kings who always vowed to pull beings from the ocean of existences to save them. Ashura kings who vowed to cultivate and attain the Tathagata's body, to be lofty and to transcend the world. Maharaga kings who delighted in seeing the Buddha and who reverently bowed to him. Great Deva kings who were forever weary of birth and death and delighted in seeing the Buddha. And great Brahma kings who revered the Buddha and who praised and made offerings to him. So, reading a rather large section here, purposes of tonight is not to go into great detail. This is what sometimes is called a Tianlung Babu. Do you know what's the translation of Tianlung? Tianlung, heavenly dragon, eightfold division of ghosts and spirits and Dharma protectors. Basically, this is what we started early, to most of us, the unseen realm, but this is not the unseen realm in this text. This is actually the realm of reality. So this raises a very interesting question. Every time I do this, people say, "Yeah, is it real? Is this real? Come on. This is just that Avatamsaka, whoa, 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 whoa. Is it actually real?" So, I remember once someone asked my teacher, "Are these things real or are they just a state of mind?" And he said, "Yes." I mean, that's worth contemplating. So what I see going on largely for me in the Avatamsaka, and I say this again, the Avatamsaka in its own words says it's about the understanding and expanding of the mind in all its states. And the word expanding the mind in all its states then presumes or states that our mind is not naturally expanded as it is in an unawakened state. It's actually sort of, if you want to say this, compressed, collapsed. We shrink and contract our mind down to the smallest compass of things. And then we say that is at the heart of everything. So we can bring it down to ethnocentrism. In other words, we collapse our awareness down to our ethnic group or tribe. And that is then where we're situated. That's the collapse or shrinking. Or we take it to geocentric and we say, oh, the earth, this is. And for a long time in early culture, that was it. The earth was a center, and there was other things out there that people could see, but the earth was really the most important center. That was a geocentric. That shifted to a heliocentric after we got a little more expansive mind with the help of telescopes. And we went from geocentric, oh, it's not the earth isn't the center, the earth goes around the sun. Oh, okay. And then we went, galaxy-centric. And now, as I described the other night, with the new telescopes that are out there, both the Euclid and, what's the latest one that replaced?
James Webb.
The Webb telescope, is that the new one? Now, whatever we thought the center was is completely beyond we're actually topsy-turvy. You can't even tell up, down, northwest. All these sort of things are just centric configurations that have anything to do with reality. And the amount of galaxies and stars that are out there are in the billions of the billions of the billions. It's almost like if you got a reasonable step away, you wouldn't even see the Earth anymore, or its sun. And each of these galaxies have planets and suns and stars that are greater in their light and power and more numerous than anything that we can see with the naked eye. So You can also have it Eurocentric, okay? And in fairness, we have Sinocentric. Actually, 中国, center 国. So the Zhong, the centering, that is the center. So for the Chinese, 中国 means that central country, that central orientation. And then everything from the center is seen as satellites going around it. So American-centric, this is the center of the universe. This is the center of all that's good and fair and just and right. And then it's great if every people should be like us and understand that this is the center. If you're Italian, you're Italian-centric, and that's the center of the universe. If you're French, like my French friend, it's Franco-centric. And from his point of view, all food, good food, real food, comes out of France. Everything else is either imitative or derivative or a poor imitation. So his standard of food and diet and everything is Franco-centric. And he doesn't even think it is Franco-centric, he thinks that that's the way it is. So when you're in a centric position, you've collapsed your consciousness down. Nationalism, I mean, the most basic and the most common default identity is egocentric, right? And so what I'm trying to say is the Avatamsaka challenges, encourages, even teases out of our, what I call the well. Do you know that metaphor? The well. So that the Avatamsaka is doing, by presenting these spirits, it's not just presenting these spirits as a sort of trick to get you to shake your mind up a little bit and think outside the box. It's actually presenting this as something that is in fact real. I'm going to make that argument. And the reason we don't understand or appreciate or see that is not because it is myth or fantasy, but because we have collapsed and shrunk our consciousness down to a very narrow silo, so to speak. You know what a silo is? Nobody? Gosh, I'm from the Midwest farm country, okay? After you harvest your crops and your corn and your wheat, where do you put it? You have this huge silo structure that goes up round, and you store it in there. It's like a big, the glass jar you keep your sugar in at home. Well, it's like a huge one outside, and every farm has a silo. And it's this round pagoda-like structure. I'm giving you some metaphors. Goes up high, and there's it's usually round and concrete, and there's a place in the top where you put all your corn and wheat, and then there's a place in the bottom, at seasonally time, you take it out. That's how you store it in a silo. So it's a very narrow, like a straw. Okay? Whew. Okay, so I thought that would be a metaphor everybody understands. No, I never seen a silo. So a silo also, when you stand in the silo at the bottom, when it's not filled, I used to go in there when I was a kid because it's really fun, and you look up, and before it's closed, you just see a patch of blue. And everything else, 360 degrees, is gone. And it's like, huh. And there's hardly any sound. There's no people. There's no animals. It's just the silo. And you can shrink your world down to this little silo thing. So, with that as the introduction, here's a passage. Where is it from? You guess. English translation. It's from another language. Have you not heard of the frog that lived in the well? This is a story. No guess? Okay. It said to the turtle of the sea. So there's a sea turtle. How big is a sea turtle? No, you're right. They're humongous. Sea turtles are really big, right? And the frog, being a frog, is really small, okay? And so the turtle said, the frog said to the turtle must have come by one day on a stroll, a very slow stroll for a turtle, saw the frog, and the frog said, "Oh, I'm so happy. I jump about the railings of the well, I rest at the crack on the bricks, and when I dive into the water, it supports my arms and chin. And when I scramble in the mud, they bury my feet and toes. I interact with the crabs and play with the minnows. Nobody can compare to me. Furthermore, I dominate the water in this well and enjoy the joy of being in the well. Isn't that wonderful? So this is the frog explaining his wonderful. And he says to the turtle, why don't you come down and take a look? And so the turtle, the sea turtle, tries to get in the well, but before it can lift its leg even over, the knee was stuck because it was too big to go down into the well. And so it circled around and around and went back, and it then, said to the frog, 1,000 miles cannot describe the sea that I come from. And the frog going, what? 1,000? What's a mile? And he described a mile to him. So that means you'd have to take this many circumference wells you have and expand it out hundreds and hundreds of times. And the frog goes, you call that a mile? You have a sea, your water, the water you live in? Wow. 1,000 miles can't describe its depth. 1,000 fathoms cannot measure its depth. And in another time previously, there were floods 9 out of 10 years, yet the sea did not increase. And in another time, there were droughts of 7 to 8 years, and the cliffs did not decrease. The sea does not change with the passing of time or the amount of water it contains. This is the great joy of the Eastern Sea. And when the frog, it said, heard this, it was astonished and had no words to reply. Okay, so this is a famous allegory story. Now you know where it's from, right? Come on, where's it from? Somebody. What does it sound like? I bet people on the line are going, there are people there don't know. I know the answer. I wish I had a prize to give out tonight saying, whoever gets the answer correctly will get a free trip to Disneyland or something. Huh? I'll get closer to home. I'll give you a hint. It's Chinese. And Shiguai. Zhuangzi! It's the Zhuangzi. Zhuangzi is always playing with relativities. He's always contrasting. But what he's doing here is basically saying the sea, the great sea that is able to contain all these things and be very expansive, is in fact the nature of reality. The frog has collapsed his world down to this little silo of the well and thinks that's everything. And so when he's confronted with this, he's at a loss for words. It goes beyond his comprehension. So this to me is what the Avatamsaka is trying to do. When I teach this, say at the university, I have to be a little more academic about it because I can't simply say, well, this is how things are. Especially to a science-minded group of students, if you say, well, this passage we just read basically is a kind of description of the landscape of the natural world of beings. It's a description of the 10 Dharma realms with all its variations and whatnot. And they go, all right. So what I have to do is step back a little bit and say, okay, there's 4 different ways that you can look at this if you want to, and this is called hermeneutics. How are you to interpret that? One is you could say these things are not real. They're figments of imagination, fantasy, and myth. And they're mind only in the sense that they're products of an overactive imagination. So this is one response. And I can't say you can't have that response. It is an acceptable response to say this is not real. A second response could be they are real and they're actual. And they're part of a larger world of reality. They are, in fact, things as they are, though mostly only glimpsed as through a glass darkly, due to the limitations we place on our consciousness. So one thing you say they're not real, the other you could say they're real, but they aren't within my experience because of a limitation of my consciousness, but not because there's something missing there. The third point that the students usually come up with as a model is they are real, but they exist in another realm. So there is this world that we're in, and there's other worlds. There's heaven, there's earth, there's human and divine, there's mundane and spiritual, there's ordinary and extraordinary, or normal, natural and supernatural. So they do what we call a dualistic construct. So they may be real, they could be real, but if they're in that realm and they're not in this realm. So these are two different worlds. And then the fourth one is that they are real and non-dual. That means they exist along a continuum of reality. That would mean that they aren't of another world, they are in the here and now, but then raises a question, why is it that we don't know or experience them? So usually where this ends up, when the students are thinking about this, some of them find it's absolutely hard to insist that they're not real, and it's absolutely hard to insist that they are real, which is actually a reasonable position if you thought about it. Because can I confirm them? And even if I confirm them in my own experience, can I convince you of that without you actually saying, okay, then show it to me? On the other hand, to absolutely deny them is also lacking in evidence. So because something we don't see or hear, to then say it does not exist is really not even what a scientist would do. They would still say, so the position that a lot of people end up is just say, I can't believe and not believe, and maybe it doesn't matter, but I should suspend judgment until I get more information. So this is not a bad position to be in. So the Avatamsaka is not presenting this to us as a matter of faith or belief. You don't have to have faith or believe in this. But it's also saying don't discard it and dismiss it until you actually have enough data. And maybe that data is actually only accessible through a shift of consciousness that can access that, which would be cultivation. So the Buddha, when asked this question, said, don't speculate on it, don't conjecture. When you bring yourself to your pure cultivation and your desires are gone, you will see this as clearly as you see an apple in the palm of your hand. Prior to that, all you see is glass darkly. All you see is mist and fog. So this is a kind of interesting paradigm. So on that, I wanted to share with you tonight, not so much stories, because I could do that. These various spirits, for example, I will say from my own experience, Angsha and I both encountered on the Bowing pilgrimage. So from my own experience, many of these are real. You don't have to believe that. I'm just telling you that's what we experienced. Some of these spirits were actually manifested in regards to day and night, to the waters, the oceans, the mountains and forests. They were actually, that was their abodes. I'm just going to share with you. And some of them were very kind and good and very helpful and saved us in a number of situations. And some were really nasty, just nasty spirits. And quite a few of them were just mischievous, playful mischievous. Master Wa said, when you try, if you try to sincerely cultivate, they'll come and test your sincerity. They want to see if you're real, like knock on you. So they would be mischievous and set up tests and so forth. I can't say triumphantly I passed all those tests or even many of them. So I had to be bailed out many times from these encounters. Any event, I'm not going to go into that tonight because that's for another time. But what I wanted to share with you is something that I found very interesting. And I'm taking these from biographies and autobiographies of monks and nuns who have cultivated. The two I'm sharing you tonight are rather contemporary. This one is Venerable Ajahn Mun, who is accredited with almost single-handedly reviving the forest tradition and the Theravada tradition. Ajahn Chah was his disciple. Ajahn Chah, is the teacher of Ajahn Sumedho, Amaro, and the whole Abhayagiri Chithurst Sangha that we're in connection with. So he's rather contemporary. The other one is this nun who was called Mei Chi, who was cultivating in Thailand. And so I'm going to share some of the things tonight with you, just kind of present some interesting stuff. The thing that strikes me about this is, first of all, both of them confirm this passage of text, okay? They just say it's real. The other thing that's very interesting about what they do is they don't think it's far out. I mean, I'll read you some of the stuff that they've experienced and describing. And they're describing it as matter-of-factly as you saying, oh yeah, I went to Costco today and I picked up a few things in aisle 6 and aisle 7, and then I ran into John and Mary and we talked a little bit and whatnot. They do the same kind of narrative about encountering these spiritual beings. So to me, that's very interesting. It's like it's not extraordinary, it's not supernatural, it's actually within what they consider to be reality and natural. So that's very, very interesting. They don't go, oh my God, far out, whoa. They don't do any of that, which leads me to the conclusion that these things are in fact, these experiences and these beings are in fact very real and very normal. Master Hua, when this was happening on our pilgrimage, he said to me, he said, if you see them as extraordinary, you're still off the mark. If you see what is extraordinary as ordinary, you're closer to what is the correct position. Very interesting. So this one I'm sharing from Ajahn Mun. And let me see if I can find the page here. The light is not good, but I can do it. Okay, I love this answer. So he's talking to some of his students. And here I'll read the passage. To the question, and then the question, do ghosts really exist? Ajahn Mun's reply was, if something truly exists in the world, could you do a light thing here? Because I'm going to be out of a light above me.
Make it brighter?
Well, I don't mean like an aura or magical light. I mean like an actual light bulb, turn it on. Not yet. No, not yet. No, that's a little better. Is there no light directly above?
Yeah, right behind, right there, Michael. The light switches.
Yeah, maybe, oh, I see.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, that's better, thank you. Do ghosts really exist? Ajahn Mun answers, if something truly exists in the world, whether a spirit or something else, it simply exists as it is. Its existence does not depend. Boy, this lighting is not so good. I don't know why. Yeah, I think it's a screen. Could you up the screen and I'll get light from behind?
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, that's getting better. Here comes the sun. Okay, if something truly exists in the world, whether spirit or anything else, it simply exists as it is. Its existence does not depend on the belief or disbelief of anyone. People may say that something exists or doesn't exist, but whether that thing actually exists or not is dependent entirely on its own nature. The same principle applies to ghosts, which people everywhere are skeptical about. In reality, these ghosts that frighten and torment people are actually creations of their own minds. Okay, so they come to believe that here and there dwell ghosts that will harm them. This in turn causes fear and discomfort to arise in them. Ordinarily, if a person doesn't mentally conjure up the idea of ghost, he doesn't suffer from a fear of them. So this seems pretty straightforward. Figment of the imagination, right? In the majority of cases, ghosts are just mental images created by those who tend to be afraid of them. As to whether there really are such things as ghosts in the world, even if I were to say that they do exist, there's still not enough proof to make the skeptics into believers, since people have a natural tendency to deny the truth. Now, this is getting a little more complex in his answer, right? Even when a thief is caught red-handed with stolen articles, he will often refuse to admit the truth. More than that, he'll fabricate an alibi to get himself off the hook and deny any wrongdoing. He may be forced to accept punishment due to the weight of the evidence against him, but he will still continue to protest his innocence. When he's in prison and someone asks him what he did wrong to deserve that punishment, he'll quickly answer that he was wrongly accused of stealing, but insist he never did it. It is rare for such a person to own up to the truth. Generally speaking, people everywhere have much the same attitude. So this is very interesting. He's saying, yeah, figments of the imagination, mostly they're created by fear and so forth, but he's saying, on the other hand here, if I were to say they were true, you wouldn't believe me. So now he's indicating something else other than just saying it's figment of the imagination. I remember once someone asked my teacher something similar to that, and he said, well, are there such things? And he said, if I said there were, you wouldn't believe me. And if I said they weren't, I'd be lying. And so what's coming out here is this sort of everything is made from the mind alone. However, there are things that exist that you don't necessarily have access to, but that doesn't mean they're not real. And you'd have to make a distinction between those which are conjured up by your imagination and those which are... Now, often what he mentions here is fears associated with that. But when they're encountered naturally, these beings, then there isn't the fear. So if I have enough time tonight, I'll go through some of these cases, but it's really, really quite interesting. Let me go to the next one. This is a particularly interesting one. And this is coming from his biography. So in the northeast provinces, Acharya Mun would give Dharma instructions to the monks late at night on special occasions. Visible to Acharya Mun, terrestrial devas, these are terrestrial spirits, earth spirits, gathered at a respectful distance and listened to his talks. Now, wait a minute. So the monks are gathered, you guys are gathered here, and behind you, there are terrestrial devas, respectfully at a distance, listening to the talks. Once he became aware of them, he called off the meeting and quickly entered samadhi, where he talked separately to the devas. Their reticence on those occasions was due to the profound respect they had for the monks. Acharya Mun explained that devas at all levels were careful to avoid passing by the monks' dwellings on the way to see him late at night. Upon arriving, they circled around Acharya Mun 3 times before sitting down in an orderly fashion. Then the leader, devas of every plane have a leader whom they obey with great deference. The leader would announce that the realm from which they came and the aspect of Dharma to which they wished to listen. Acharya Mun would return their greetings and then focus his mind on that aspect of Dharma requested by the devas. As the Dharma arose within, he began to talk. And when they had comprehended the Dharma that he delivered, they all said, sadhu, 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 3 times. A sacred, it's a sound that echoed throughout the spiritual universe. This exclamation was heard by everyone with celestial hearing, the divine ear, but not by those whose ears, and this is really wonderful, were like handles on a pot of soup. In other words, they had ears, but they couldn't hear. The handles on a pot of soup is just sort of dull, dead. When this discourses in Dharma ended, the devas again circumambulated 3 times, keeping them on his right, and returned to their realms in an elegant fashion, very different from humans. Not even Acharya Mun and his monks could embrace the graceful movements, for there's a great difference between the grossness of our bodies and the subtle refinement of theirs. As soon as the Deva guest retreated to the edge of the monk's area, they floated up into the air as if pieces of fluff blown by the wind. On each visit, they described in the same manner, arrived outside the monk's living and then walking the remainder of the way. Always very graceful in their movements. They never spoke making a lot of noise the way humans do when they see an acharya and they revere. This is probably due to the refined nature of their celestial bodies, which restrict them from behaving in such gross manners. Here is an area in which the human beings can be considered superior to devas, talking loudly. Devas are always very composed when listening to the Dharma, never fidgeting restlessly or showing any conceit that would disturb the speaking monk. And just this beautiful description. And this goes on. So this is one passage. What was really interesting, and I don't have time to go into tonight too much, they would request Dharma that was of the Prajna Paramita category. So he said during the day when he talked to the villagers, he would say to them, be good to each other, don't steal each other's animals, don't commit adultery with husbands and wives and so forth, and try to get a handle on your temper. Oh, and this they go, sadhu, 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 and they'd go. When the Devas came, he was doing Avatamsaka-like teaching, and they were completely mesmerized, and they'd have to go over these basics, so it was a whole different level of Dharma. But again, it goes back to teaching to propensities, as one level, and also the differences in the capacities. And he was able to respond to all of these. Let me see, there's another section. If you find this interesting, I'll read more. Okay. Having written about the Devas, I shall now write about the human visitors that came to see Ajahn Mun. Being human, I'm also included in this matter. This is the writer. But I still wish to apologize to the reader if there is anything unappealing or inappropriate in what follows. In some ways, I have an incurably roguish character, and you will no doubt notice. However, I feel it necessary to record truthfully what Ajahn Mun told his disciples privately. Therefore, I ask your forgiveness and include this, so on and so forth. Ajahn Mun said there was a great difference between humans and devas in the way they communicated with him and listened to his discourses and Dharma. Devas of every realm, the spirit realm, from the highest to the lowest, are able to comprehend the meaning and of a discussion of Dharma much more easily than their human counterparts. And when the discussion is over, their explanations of approval, sadhu, echo throughout the realms. Devas of every realm have enormous respect for the monks and so forth. When coming to listen, and he goes on, this is another passage where he's describing this, what I gave you. This one is a very interesting passage. What this passage is doing, first, a little bit about Ajahn Mun. He didn't have much time or access to study, and he regretted that he wasn't able to study more of the scriptures. He said if he had been able to study the text more and actually been able to meet good teachers, he would have wasted less time in his cultivation getting caught up with spiritual states. He called it spiritual sightseeing. Once he developed his concentration powers, he could actually go and enter and go to these realms, and he was doing it sort of like surfing channels on a special TV. And he realized it wasn't really directly dealing with the issue of birth and death. But then he came to understand that and brought himself around. But here's a very interesting passage. On the night subsequent to Ajahn Mun's attainment of vimutti, I've used that term before. Vimutti basically means liberation or freedom. So he's had a profound awakening experience. On that occasion, a number of Buddhas, accompanied by their Arhat disciples, came to congratulate him on his vimutti dharma. Do you all follow that? a number of Buddhas and their Arhat disciples came. One night, a certain Buddha, accompanied by tens of thousands of Arhat disciples, came to visit. The next night, he was visited by another Buddha, who was accompanied by hundreds of thousands of Arhat disciples. Each night, a different Buddha came to express his appreciation, accompanied by a different number of Arhat disciples. Acharyaman stated that the number of accompanying Arhat disciples varied according to each of the Buddha's relative accumulation of merit, a factor that differed from one Buddha to the next. Now, I'm reading, this is a Theravada Thai forest monk, and he is actually giving you the same message that's just come through the Avatamsaka. They were gathered as bodhisattvas in numbers like so forth with their disciples to the various Buddhas in different lands and so on and so forth. Here you have it being recorded as this is his narrative. The actual number of Arhats did not represent the total number of Arhat disciples. They merely demonstrated the relative levels of accumulated merit and perfection that each individual Buddha possessed. Among the Arhat disciples accompanying each of these Buddhas were quite a few young novices. Acharyaman was skeptical about this, so he reflected on it and realized that the term Arhat does not apply exclusively to monks. Novices whose hearts are completely pure are also Arhat disciples, and their presence did not raise an issue with the term in any way. Most of the Buddhas who came to show their appreciation to Acharyaman addressed him in the following. Now we're getting his report of what the Buddha said to him. This is just remarkable. I, the Tathagata, can assure you that you've escaped from the hurtful effects of the monstrous suffering which you had endured in the prison of samsara. So I've come to express my appreciation. This prison is enormous and quite impregnable. It's full of seductive temptations, which so enslave those who are unwary that it is extremely difficult for anyone to break free. Of the vast number of people living in the world, hardly anyone is concerned enough to think looking for a way out of dukkha that perpetually torments their bodies and minds. They are like sick people who cannot be bothered to take medicine. Even though medicines are plentiful, they are of no use to a person who refuses to take them. This is a Buddha speaking to him. Buddha Dharma is like medicine. Beings in samsara are afflicted with the painful, oppressive disease of the klesha, whanau, which causes endless suffering. Inevitably, this disease can be cured only with the medicine of Dharma. Left uncured, it will drag living beings through endless succession of births and deaths, all of them bound up with physical and material pain. And although Dharma exists everywhere and throughout the whole universe, those who are not really interested in properly availing themselves of it, healing qualities are unable to take advantage of it. Dharma exists in its own natural way. Beings in samsara spin around like wheels through the paths of suffering in each successive life. In the natural way of samsara, they have no real prospect of ever seeing an end to suffering. And there's no way to help them unless they are willing to help themselves by firmly holding the principles of Dharma, earnestly trying to put them into practice. No matter how many Buddhas become enlightened, or how extensive their teachings are, only those willing to take up the prescribed medicine will benefit. It goes on. The Dharma taught by the Buddhas is invariably the same: to renounce evil and do good. This is so straightforward. There exists no Dharma teaching more exceptional than this. For even the most those most exceptional kleshas in the hearts of living beings are not so exceptional that they can't transcend the power of Dharma taught by the Buddhas. This Dharma is in itself sufficient to eradicate every kind of klesha there is, unless, of course, those practicing allow themselves to be defeated by the kleshas and so conclude that Dharma must be worthless. By nature, klesha, afflictions, always resisted the power of Dharma. Consequently, people who defer to the kleshas are people who disregard Dharma. They are unwilling to practice the way, for they view it as something difficult to do, a waste of time that they could otherwise spend enjoying themselves. And despite the harm of such pleasures cause them, a wise, far-sighted person should not retreat into the shell like a turtle in a pot of boiling water, sure to die because it can't find a way to escape. The world is a cauldron, boiling with the consuming heat of the kleshas. Earthly beings of every description everywhere must endure this torment, for there is no safe place to hide, no way to elude the conflagration burning in their own hearts. Right there is where dukkha, suffering, is. And then it says, you have truly seen the genuine Tathagata nature, haven't you? He's asking Ajahn Mun. What is the genuine Tathagata? The genuine Tathagata is simply the purity of your own heart that you have just realized. The bodily form in which I now appear is merely a manifestation of a relative, conventional reality. This form does not represent the true Buddha or the true heart. It's just a conventional bodily presence. I could go on. There's so much more, and this is wonderful. Mei Chi also, and again, it's 9 o'clock and we ran out of time, and so I won't go on, but maybe some other night I'll share some of this again with you. But in particular cases, she develops the ability to communicate, and these spirits and beings come to her, animals that just have been slaughtered and so forth. And she just relates this very matter-of-factly, and then goes about her life teaching and transforming. But when these things happen, she doesn't see them as extraordinary, unusual. And so why I'm sharing this with you is these are sort of the actual narratives, biographies, and autobiographies reporting sort of from the field. And Mei Chi in particular, it was very difficult for her. She was basically pressured into marriage. It took her a long time to be able to get out of the marriage, to be able to cultivate the way in this way. And a long time to meet a teacher. But her roots were so deep that the first time she sat in meditation, she just entered samadhi as a little girl. Quite remarkable. So it is important to point out that these people have special, I won't say abilities, but they have a special precondition, special spiritual stamina of good roots, so that when they actually begin their practice, they're able quickly to see these things and directly. But because we don't necessarily have those good roots, and we have karmic obstructions, we sometimes get maybe a feeling or a glimpse of it, but we don't really see it clearly. We don't comprehend it clearly. Even the fact that we're inclined to maybe take it as on faith is already a sign that there's a good root of memory, so to speak, an inspired understanding, which is another translation for faith that's at work in us. But I share this with you because these were not extraordinary people. Mei Chi was just a village girl. She didn't go to university, nor did Ajahn Mun. So in many ways, they're like the sixth patriarch. They just came from common ground, common experiences, but they cultivated so diligently that this all of a sudden manifested. The other point I want to make is we tend to think Theravada Mahayana. Oh, here's Avatamsaka Mahayana with all these ghosts and spirits and realms and Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Folks, it was actually in their experience. So they're not identifying with vehicles or isms. They're just saying, here's what we experience. And at that ground of that common experience, these vehicles and these isms just completely vanish, and you're just dealing with things as they really are. What's also interesting is that Ajahn Mun and Mei Chi, people say, well, they were cultivating the Arhat path and therefore were only interested in their own liberation. This is another false narrative that gets spun. They were extensively involved in teaching, transforming in the village, among their community, traveling widely. And then as their lives went on, they took on more and more teaching and more people, and built more and more temples and monasteries for people to cultivate. So again, as their enlightenment opened up, the what we call the Bodhisattva mind just naturally manifested from the actual heart of their understanding and their compassion. So it's really interesting, but I'll stop. Any questions, either online or off? I'm sorry I didn't get to do more of Mei Chi. It's wonderful stuff, and I thought tonight I want to have enough material to take up Heng Sher's hour and a half. There it is. Any questions, comments, thoughts? Nothing? Going once? Going twice? Don't do sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Nothing online? Okay. Anybody online? Okay. Well, if we do another session, I'll share some more of these stories, and then maybe some also from the pilgrimage. How's that?
Are you doing it next week?
I don't know who's doing it next week. I think Heng Sher should be back by then. Okay. Well, back in Australia, in another world with various beings of different forms and sizes and language and shapes and so forth. Okay. We always do the transference. Is that okay? Would you mind grabbing the yenching from the altar, the bell? Oh, yeah, I need the bell to be able to thank you. Thank you. May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may our minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light dispel the darkness of our endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Bow in respect to the triple jewel.